The blood was running down his finger as a thin red line. He leaned his head against the wall of his house. The sweat on his forehead was cold. The taste of iron in his mouth was unmistakable. He put the pocket knife and the piece of wood he'd been carving down. Peter was young. He'd always dreamt about making a difference, doing something, fighting for freedom, for justice. But he had never dreamt that opportunity would be the German invasion of Denmark, his own country. And there he was, with his head against the wall, dizzy, with a cut in his finger. He knew it was just a small cut and he wouldn't die from it. He was waiting for his friends to come. And they came one by one. They went into the kitchen. Sitting around the kitchen table, his mother making supper, they talked about the war, about the Germans. And Peter said they had to do something. Talking about doing something wasn't enough. There had to be something done for justice to prevail. A few days later, the boys formed a group of resistance. In the beginning, just small things, like stealing the Germans' coats in the winter time, so they had to come out in the snow and the storm and freeze, or puncture the tires of their cars, or put sugar in the fuel tanks. Small things, but they made Peter feel good, made him feel like he did something, really make a change, a difference. By 1943, the situation had changed quite a bit. It wasn't enough just to put sugar in fuel tanks or write sarcastic songs mocking the German leader, even though Peter was really good at that. Our little resistance group had gotten contact with the Allies in England, and for the first time there were guns on the table in Peter's house. You don't have to shoot anybody, you know. You don't have to use the gun at all, one of the comrades said to Peter. But I do want to. I can do it, Peter said. Yes, but you don't have to. You've never tried it before. We have. If you just hide the guns, that's fine. And Peter agreed to hide the guns. All that night, Peter was thinking about how he could make a difference, how he could be of any consequence of all. If he couldn't fight, if he fainted by the mere sight of blood, if he couldn't use a gun. And then there was Ada, the girl he'd just met. She was so beautiful, so kind, and he really liked her. What would she think? Would she have him? If he couldn't fight? If he couldn't defend her, the country? The next morning, Peter decided that he would learn how to shoot, how to handle a gun. At dusk, he took one of the guns and put it in his coat pocket and walked out to the woods behind the city. He listened. If there was anybody there, any Germans, anyone who could see him. If he got caught with a gun in his pocket, he would jeopardize the whole group's security. And yet he wanted to learn how to shoot, He went further into the woods. Everything was quiet. Everything was still. His heart was beating at the rate of an express train. He was tense. He could feel the gun against his thigh at every step he took. He put his hand in his pocket, felt the gun, the cold metal against his palm, just to be sure, be ready if something happened. A bird took flight. The sound of its wings in the air scattered the silence. There was a shot. Peter felt something hard against his thigh. He fell to the ground and stifled his cry in the forest floor. He felt as if somebody had taken a burning, red-hot poker and thrown it right through his thigh. And he listened for the Germans to come and get him, for the Germans' cry in the forest that he had been discovered. But everything was still. There was not a sound in the forest. There was nobody there apart from him. He felt the gun in his hand, his finger on the trigger, and realized that he had shot himself. He couldn't faint there. He had to get up. He had to get back to the city. The taste of iron in his mouth. There was too much water in there. There were spots in front of his eyes. He couldn't faint there. He had to get back. And step by step, he walked back to the city. The blood running down his leg, red, thick and warm, into his boot. As he reached the city, he could hear the slopping of the blood in the boot. As he reached his house, he was sure there were at least 3 gallons of blood in there. He went into the house, into the kitchen. His father was there, his friends, and when he saw his mother getting up, he fainted. When he woke, he was lying on the kitchen table. There was a doctor dressing the wound, and his friends. "What happened, Peter? Who shot you? What happened? Tell us!" And Peter said, I am... And then he felt his mother's hand in his, warm and reassuring. And he heard her voice as she said, "Shouldn't we just agree that Peter got shot in combat?"